thanks everybody for taking the time to come and listen to kind of my journey on how I got started with UI and UX. It's definitely been an interesting journey, and hopefully this will help, especially if you're interested in wanting to try it, kind of take what I've done and maybe apply it to what you're doing. I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So if there's any questions any of you have along the way, I'm more than happy to answer those. So I guess to give some background, so my name is Alex Kuklinski. I started a software company called fyiio, and it's a tutorial management platform built for people to create interactive video and written tutorials that improve the learning experience. I am a non-technical founder, so not the best thing to start a software company when you can't code, but I think in my case, it was a blessing in disguise. Just really focusing on what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve, how can we design a solution around that, and then how can we show people iteratively what we're trying to do and get people's feedback to essentially what are images and mock-ups. So, excuse me. So when we actually go out and put a lot of money into developing something, we know that what we're building is on the right track. So I guess I will share my screen here. I'll show a couple of the different tools that I used along the way to kind of get where we are now, and kind of go from like the earliest mockups to some of the different tools that I've used along the way, and then show what it actually ended up looking like. So really the way that I work is the first thing that I do is I really go onto a whiteboard and really just kind of do a brain dump of all the ideas, all of the things that I think that this might look and feel like. And then what I do is I use a tool called balsamiq. That's B-A-L-S-A-M-I-Q. And this is a wireframing tool. So this is basically, the reason why I love balsamiq is that it looks like a sketch. And you don't have to be overly focused on colors or the actual elements. It's all pretty drag and drop. And so to kind of show you an example of how easy this is to use, if you wanted to mock up what an iPhone interface might look like, you can drag the iPhone element and then start dragging in keyboard, different buttons, that type of thing. And it's just a really quick way, especially if you don't have any experience with UI and UX, of just putting something together that resembles an actual product. And so what's also cool about this is you can make them interactive too. So, if you wanted, if I pull something up here, it's one of these. So basically, this is an example of a page I made in balsamiq. I don't know why it's not centered here, but what's really cool is like all of these are predefined elements. I really didn't have to do very much. Like this is a rectangle that I just dragged in, put some text on top of. And what's interesting is this took a really long time to actually get to this point. And let's see, why is this? There should be like a history on the side here. Oh, that's why. Okay, sorry about that. So what's interesting about this is you can kind of see the history of it. So in order for us to get to this page, I actually started off with something that looked like this, and it was just complete trash. But what's nice is I took kind of the ideas I had in my head, things that I put onto a whiteboard, put it into balsamiq, and it was just a great way to get feedback from people who I thought were our customers. And I basically did this for every single piece of the platform that we would be building, whether that's a dashboard or our tutorial viewer or the template for creating the tutorials. And so I used balsamiq to really throw something together relatively quickly. And I was talking about how this can be interactive. So the cool thing is, if I come into here and let's see, where'd that go? So what you can do is create these hotspots. So if I click on something that's not supposed to be clicked on, you'll see these little red areas. And so if I click on that, it will take me to the different areas that I had designed. And of course, since this is the 6th or the very first one, let's do this one. Here we go. So again, like there's like red areas that you can click on, and then it'll take you to the different mockups I have. And so these are just basically static images that I'm clicking through, really trying to tell a story of how this product would be used. And when I talk to people, it's really nice because it's not just me talking about ideas, it's actually showing them something that they would be probably using in real life. And this was great because you saw that initial version of the dashboard that just looked bad because it was way too busy. There was just too much going on. And that was a lot of feedback that I got early on. And so what I did was I took that feedback and then iterated on it. And when you talk to people and they're willing to talk with you many different times, you're really able to go from something that looks like this, get really good feedback on what you can improve, and you can kind of see the different, you can kind of see the different versions of how this came up to be, and ultimately just looked a lot nicer than what we had put together initially. And like I said, we did this for a lot of the different parts of the platform, like user management, content management, template stuff, that type of thing. So balsamiq's a really cool tool. I think you can get it for under $100, or there's a subscription now, which I would guess would be like $9 or $10 a month. But it's a really cool tool if you're initially trying to get into designing a software product without any background, and really show people who you think might be your customers early on, kind of what you're envisioning, get real-time feedback on what you're doing, and just have it be clicked through. So this is a really cool tool that I really enjoyed using.
Hey,
now,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
We do have a question. What degree do you need to be a UI UX designer? Is there any specific degree or not really?
That's a good question. I'm not totally sure. I'm sure you can take those courses like at UNO, UNL. Probably be good if you did versus learn everything on the fly. But I didn't get a degree in design. I maybe took 1 or 2 classes at the art school. It was kind of just trial by fire for me, and kind of just seeing, what things do I think look good, and then getting feedback and improving it that way. But that's a good question. I would, if it's something that you really want to commit to, like as your full-time gig, definitely look at what options are available, like with your counselor at the university. But I think, it would be really helpful on my end if I would have taken some initial design classes, just to kind of skip a lot of the hard lessons I learned that way. So not the best answer, but that's kind of how I approached it. My background's actually in YouTube, so I made a lot of YouTube videos, and we got paid with YouTube. So my background's in video, and then I went to school for broadcasting. So I actually don't really have a design. I didn't really get started with design until I started building fyiio right after high school, right after college. Any other questions before I move on? Cool. So as you continue to design things, or at least as I continue to design things with fyiio along the way, there kind of gets a point where you're showing people and they kind of just want to see what it will ultimately look like. And so basically what I did was I then took these balsamiq mockups and then converted them to Photoshop. And so this is a video I made that just has a lot of Photoshop. Like all the images are basically Photoshop files, minus the animation. So kind of ignore that. But essentially I just built this in Photoshop. And that's something that I would really avoid doing. And what I would do instead is use a tool called Sketch, which I'll show in a couple minutes here. When you're thinking of design, I think it's really helpful to initially just pick a design language that you want to use. In my case, I went to material design as the language I wanted to use for fyiio as we were building out the platform. And if you're not familiar with material design, it's Google's design language. So you'll see a lot of the things that material design has, you'll see a lot in different Google products. But it's super customizable. And the reason why I would recommend you picking a design language like Material, for example, is that they've already done a lot of the work in terms of building all of the elements, how they interact with each other. It kind of just takes the mystery out of designing something for the first time. And it also makes it a lot easier when you go to build something, because the developers that will ultimately be building this don't have to build everything from scratch. They can plug and play existing elements that material design or whatever your framework has. They can plug that into your project. And ultimately that makes it a lot faster for that developer to build a product. And it also makes it a lot cheaper because they're not spending as much time custom building things that are basically already existing. Once you get to a point where you have a lot of revenue, you have a lot of customers, and you kind of want to do it on your own, like you could definitely build out your own design language, kind of like what Huddle has done. If you ever heard that background or that story, like Huddle has a really cool design and how they took this cobbled, I think John Henry Mueller would call it like this jumbled mess of different elements throughout the Huddle platform and really unified it under a single language. But getting started, pick a design language and kind of go with it. And the reason why is because when you go into tools like Sketch, all of the icons, all of the elements are already there, and you can use tools like Sketch and different plugins to really just import those design or those design elements and bake it into your platform. So this is a tool called Sketch. It's only available on Mac, unfortunately, but you can also use tools like Adobe XD on PC. Relatively the same thing, although I've really only have experience with Sketch at this point. But anyway, so Sketch is really nice at taking or making really high fidelity mockups, like things that basically people would actually be using, making it look that fidelity. And so what's cool about Sketch is you can kind of see, early on what those balsamiq mockups were. This is what we wanted it to end up looking like when people view all the tutorials that they've made on our platform. So you can see this looks a lot crisper, it's a lot cleaner, resolution's a lot higher. But it also looks like a tool that somebody would realistically be using versus something like this, right? So there's a pretty big difference between what this looks like and what this looks like. So one of the cool things about Sketch is that they have these symbols that you can create. And symbols are essentially single elements that get applied or get added into different mockups that you're creating as you design different pages. And a cool example of like the power of these icons. So inside of the content page that I have, these are all the different components of our, basically just our content tab within our platform. You can see there's a lot of these blue, they're called app bars. You can see there's a lot of these blue app bars on my screen. Let's just say I wanted to change the color for each of these, or I just wanted it to be, orange, right? That would be a lot of time to have to go into each individual mockup, change that app bar on every single screen, right? It'd be a giant pain, giant waste of time. And that's why I wouldn't recommend that you use Photoshop, because you have to actually manually do that each time. So to kind of show you the power of symbols, if I come into here, and this is the app bar, if I want to make this orange, right? If I go back to my content page, you'll see that that change gets applied everywhere all at once. So it's really cool if you want to, just play around with a different color or like a different layout. There's some pretty cool things that you can do with symbols. They're really powerful. And one of the things that I'm working on right now are building these knowledge base pages. And so what I've done is I've created this this symbol, and I can essentially use that symbol across all these different mockups here. So as I'm fluidly, changing different things or tweaking different things, I don't have to apply it in every single one of these mockups. I can basically make that change once and have it applied in all of my different artboards. Once you basically figure out like an idea of how you want your user flow to go, and I should probably I'll change that back later. But once you have an idea of how you want your user flow to look like when somebody uses your platform for the first time, I typically tend to organize my artboards by themes. So if you are wanting to embed a tutorial, I have, okay, this is what your page looks like. Up next, like if they hover over this two-line piece or two-line list in the platform, it has a little shadow just to designate that you're hovering over it. And then if you click the button, this is a menu that pops up. And then this is a modal that pops up. These are all material design elements that I basically just plug and played. There's a plugin with Sketch called Sketch Material. and you can import all of the material design icons, different colors, topography, elevations, and other things, which makes it really easy to import. You don't have to recreate everything in material design and put it into Sketch for you to use it. There's a lot of plugins you can use that do that already. So once you figure out kind of what you want a user flow to look like, one of the cool tools that I use is a thing called Envision. And actually a good example for this would be with the quizzes that we're building right now. So with our quizzes, we have, if you want to edit a quiz, this is how you would, this is like what the first page would look like, what the second page, so on and so forth. Well, what we've done to make it look like it's an actual product that people would be using, what we've done is put it into Envision. So essentially, when you export your artboards, there's a plugin to Sketch that'll put it into Envision, and Envision is basically a mock-up walkthrough tool. And what you can do is put these, very much like you would with balsamiq, you can put these hotspots over specific areas of your mock-ups. And this is where you would want it to click. And if you click on it, you can see that I want this, if I click on this area of this image, I want it to go to this page. And what happens is if I go into preview mode, and imagine like I'm trying to sell you a piece of software here, and this doesn't exist yet. Well, I could say, well, yeah, to create a quiz, you can click on this button, and then here you can put in what your quiz is about. I can hit continue, and you can basically just walk through this, all of the images that you've made inside of Sketch, and walk through it like it's a real product. And it's really cool for showing additional functionality, especially once you already have a product. Like, hey, this is additional functionality that we want to add, and this is what it's going to look like. This is actually what we're doing with a couple of our customers, is building out things that they, like feature requests that they have, and really working with them to make sure that what we build is specifically what they want. So basically just walking through, this is how quizzes would work. And then when they're done, you assign the quiz to a tutorial and you can take the quiz. So this is all just images. If I go into here, you can see these are all the different images on the bottom that I've made for showing people how quizzes will work in our platform once we have it built out. And it's just a really cool way to show interactivity within something that really doesn't exist. And we actually use this method to get one of our first customers, which was Zillow. If you're familiar with Zillow, the home real estate marketplace platform. So we basically came in and said, hey, here's what we want to do. This is the value that we're going to add, and everything that we showed them didn't actually exist. And we were honest with them. We told them it didn't exist and they were just images. But at least they understood, okay, this is what the platform does. This is how it's going to do it. We're in, and we'll move forward. So those are just some of the different tools that I've used. When I actually go into the platform, you can see how close that resembles our actual product now. So this is like all the tutorials that I've made on the platform. And then if I wanted to, create a tutorial in this case, which is a little bit different, it's not a quiz, but you can see the design is pretty much taken straight out of the mockups, which is awesome, because as a designer, you want, of course, you want the actual end product to look as closely to your mockups as possible. And so by using material and being very on top of all the different pages that you want to design, very transparent to your developer on what needs to happen, what language you're using, how you want it to look and feel like. So there's not a lot of guesswork. And I love developers, but the less guesswork that you can give a developer, the better, because it doesn't either look good, or they have to take some creative freedom. And it's like, okay, there's a mock-up piece that's missing. I need to put something in place. And so that's a loving ode, I guess. But yeah, so those are the tools that I've used, from a whiteboard to putting it into a mock-up tool like balsamiq, where it looks very sketchy and looks like I basically took it from a whiteboard and put it into a platform, but also made it interactive so people could understand what we're doing. It's a lot easier to update things inside of balsamiq than it is like an actual platform. And so once you have a good idea of what you have in balsamiq, then it was just a matter of putting it into Sketch. and figuring out what that design language was, which was in my case was material. And once I got that ready, then what I did was put it into a tool like Envision, where then I really make it interactive and designate all the different functionalities that I want the platform to have. And then when we built it, there wasn't a whole big variation with that. And I think it's really, really important to, even if you're new to design and you want to build a software product, it's incredibly valuable to go through that process of iterating, showing people what you think the platform will look like, ask for their changes and their feedback, and basically make those changes to your mockups, because it's a lot easier to change that stuff than it is when you actually build something, and it's a lot cheaper as well. I think one of the things that I've seen a lot happen is founders will custom design things, and then when it comes to a developer wanting to build it, every one of those elements that that person had designed is custom. And they might know that going in, but a lot of cases they don't, and then their development costs skyrocket because there's just a lot more time that they have to spend. And so we've saved a lot of money by spending the time up front, iterating on designs, make them interactive in Envision, using an existing design language like Material, and then being as thorough as possible with all the mockups that I create. And so, I have so many different individual pages of just things, ideas. I think the content one, for example, these are a lot of different pages to manage, so on and so forth. But it's good to be thorough in all the different things that you want your tool to be, or what you want your tool to look like, because when you hand that off to a developer, all that work is done, and they basically just have to make it look as close to that as possible. So that's, I think, pretty much everything I had. Tools I used, kind of how I got to where we are now, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have, or hear where different people are at, and maybe help along the way that way. Yeah, happy to chat.
I do have some questions. Did you, that might benefit the group? Did you do, when you were undertaking this, is there any blogs that you read or professionals you followed that kind of helped get you started on that path?
Ooh, that's a good question. John Henry Mueller, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's a prominent local designer in town. He's a really cool guy, easy to get in touch with. He's the one that did Huddle's unified design language. If you've seen him talk, you know that it's a really cool story. So he's a good one that's local. Man, I read a lot of blogs about material and pros and cons to it. But no, I don't really have a whole lot of designer blogs that I follow, or a ton of individual designers that I follow, or that's a good question. I probably should have a lot more, but I don't. I guess one other tool that I really like that I've found relatively recently is something called tilde.cc. It's a visual website builder. And what's really cool about it is you don't really need any coding experience to do anything. So this is again, I'm very apt on doing things leanly and not spending a lot of money to build things. And so, when it comes to building a website, there's a lot of visual editors like Wix and Squarespace, things like that, on how to build sites. But I really like this one called Tilde. And so what's kind of cool is, once this loads, so this might not look like a whole lot. Actually, it's probably a bad example. Let me go back to this one. So what's really cool about this tool is it's really drag and drop. So if you wanted to, you can see all the different types or sizes of screens up here at the top. So desktop, what a tablet might look like, a larger phone, different smaller phones, and changes that you make to this page don't impact the other ones. And so it's a lot easier versus trying to do something in WordPress from scratch, especially if you're not a developer. And it's pretty customizable in terms of the different settings that you can change. So in terms of color, sizes, weights, spacings, opacities, links, and they even have some pretty cool animation things that you can do too. Tilda is a really great tool if you need to throw a website together relatively quick and you want to have a little bit more control over the design. This is called their zero block. So they have a bunch of predefined elements, that you would find on Wix or Squarespace, but the zero block thing is kind of their killer feature, being able to really do the, design things kind of your way without needing to have or be locked into a predefined element. So tilda.cc is this website or the tool. I really like it. I put web pages together really quickly. Our whole homepage is built with this as well.
Thank you for coming, and everybody have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.